We have regrets from Councillor Roger Murphy. He's working, I know where he's at, he's a long ways from home. And we'll move on, approval of the agenda.
I have a
Community grant,
community grant for Abrams River Hall that I'd like to add to the,
13-2. 13A2.
right.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Conflict of interest. Anybody got any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none, move on to presentations. That's done, no presentations. Adoption of the minutes, special council meeting July 3rd, 2018.
So move.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Regular council meeting September 11th, 2018.
So move.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Audit committee meeting,
Slow move.
Second.
that was September 25th, by the way. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Committee of the whole, September 25th.
So move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Bylaw, water, well supply lending program amended. Basically, it's our old program we had from 2 years ago with a few minor changes. Would you like to highlight those, CAO?
The interest rate increased to 3.5% to reflect a higher interest rate to borrow generally. The qualifying property owner, there is some language around whether they're in default of any municipal taxes. It is taxes on that property, not just generally in default of municipal taxes. The outstanding, section 13, the outstanding loan shall be considered the same as rates and taxes in the MGA, and the property shall follow the same proceedings as municipal taxes for tax sale purposes, is wording to clarify that this becomes much like the outstanding taxes provisions, and therefore, if somebody does not pay the water loan, they can go to tax sale.
Right.
And then there was some wording that we added: if the qualifying property owner sells the property during the course of the loan, the entire loan shall become payable and treated as taxes on date of sale. So there's no ambiguity around these loans. If somebody sells the house, it gets paid. And those are the changes.
And this is the second reading, so I believe we can have a motion tonight.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Thank you. Councilors report, we'll start way over with Councilor Johnson, come around.
Just want to, I'm trying to remember if the last time if we were here about the pump in Lower West Pamlico at Micah Hunn's well has been set up by, I think by Von Dotterman property, our wastewater operating West Pamlico, and it's been used a lot. I've seen, I don't know how many people now lately, since we've had rain here, I haven't seen as many, so I'm hoping that means that people have water in their well. I don't know if, people have, I'm not sure if anybody's keeping track of who has water and who doesn't, but, obviously, nobody seems to be complaining since after the rain, so I don't know, maybe Councillor Digdon, you might be familiar with if people have still been using it, or?
Not near as much lately.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
No.
But that was a good thing. We needed it.
It was a great thing, and just to touch on that a little bit, I feel as though maybe we should put a more permanent setup in there for next year. Hopefully we'll never use it, but right now we just have an extension cord going across on the ground and that, and I believe the owners may be willing to let something like that happen. Be worth talking with them anyway.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilor Albright?
I attended a few meetings, attended the Nikhil board meeting, as well as a recreation meeting, and I just want to mention for recreation that this upcoming Saturday is the Halloween event for the children. They're changing it up this year. They're doing a pumpkin decorating event at the archives. And also, Jeanette has mentioned several times, and I've seen it on Facebook, that the Sports Awards banquet is coming up on November 30th. And if there are anybody who has any nominations for, they usually have male athlete of the year, female athlete of the year. There's the youth, the male youth, female youth, as well as official and coach of the year, that they are accepting nominations.
It has to be provincial. Is it a provincial, do you have to win a provincial award or?
No, it's Yarmouth County.
Oh, Yarmouth County.
Yarmouth County.
Yeah.
As well, I attended the Seniors Expo. I gave greetings on behalf of the municipality. And the Oktoberfest, I volunteered at the Oktoberfest as well. That's it.
Councillor Surratt.
Just on the water situation, I did haul a lot of water down in my area for the residents at the fire hall. And although there's, like Councillor Dartmouth said, we've had rain, we've got a few people that the water's not coming up. There seem to be some of the veins or the sources are not coming in the wells, but we're not using, maybe a couple of people are using the fire hall to get the water now. So the situation is getting a lot better. And I did go to the Seniors Expo, not to your part, but the part where they had the fashion show and that, and didn't try to dress or nothing like that, but I did go, and it was well attended. It was good. That's it.
Deputy Warden, news?
Yep. I was in Halifax at the end of the month for CDNA, our board meeting. And that weekend, the last weekend of the month, we had the LBANS conference, library conference, which was held in Yarmouth, which was very well attended and well put together. There were some very, very good topics, and our keynote speaker was, I guess, a refugee from Syria, who told his story. Excellent, excellent speaker. Very interesting. I mean, I don't know if you've heard, they're in Antigonish, and if you've heard of Peace by Chocolate.
Yeah.
And that's who they are. And I mean, they were set up like that in where they lived, and then just got bombed out. And the Derek here, who was a keynote speaker, was in medical school, had 1 year left, and the school was destroyed. Couldn't finish his medical studies, but he goes around now, does talks to different people about their situation. I was also at the volunteered at the Oktoberfest. This afternoon, I can't even think. Anyway, I went to a meeting this afternoon.
At least you know that.
I can't think. Nova Scotia, Tourism Nova Scotia was giving a presentation about all their, just what went on and their projection and whatever. It was very interesting. People who visited, like they had percentage of people who visited different areas. The Yarmouth and the Cajun Shores area, 3%. And we're wondering, and my question to them was whether or not, are we being exposed enough? Are we being left out? Because when you look, well, of course, when you see Halifax area was the biggest one, of course, and it's gonna be, you know. And their answer was, well, it's such a small area, but we've got a lot to offer in a small area, you know. And I think maybe it is that we're not being exposed enough through Tourism Nova Scotia. What else did I do? I'm looking at my schedule here. I guess that's about last year, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's about it for me.
Councillor Long, anything to add?
Actually, I'm gonna take this opportunity, I didn't wanna interrupt, in between the public hearing and regular council, but I'm actually feeling quite under the weather. And, I have a lot of work to do tomorrow, so I just wanted to show up for the public hearing, cause I felt that was important, but I'm going to apologize and, just skip out if that's okay with
That's
everyone.
okay with everybody, I
Thank you.
assume?
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for coming, you added a lot to that hearing.
Yeah.
Councillor Bolt?
Attended a few meetings, Nikhil, Recreation, Yarm Industrial Commission, and the Audit Committee. Also, due to the water situation, there's still few that are calling for water. My husband brings water to residents, so he did bring some again this weekend, so it's still being asked for. And the washer that the fire department purchased was very well used, and that was a very good and very good thing that they came up with. And everybody has all you need is couple of washers, and everybody can dry their clothes at home. So I thank the fire department for doing that. That's it.
Councillor Digdon?
The only thing I was gonna touch base on a little more was, about the water issue. Like, I feel as though maybe we should take a little more proactive approach on it and have ourselves ready in case, something like this would happen next year, the following year. Like, according to what the climatologists and that are all saying, it's gonna be happening more and more. So maybe we should look at a couple more places where people could wash clothes and stuff like that, and, you know, have a water source and that to help them out. And that I was even been giving out water from my own place home. Luckily enough, I have lots to give, but anyway, that's all I'd like to see happen. Thank you.
On that note as well, I've had questions asked whether or not the municipality couldn't have locations where, like drilled wells or something in the municipality where people could go rather than depend on private and whatever else. So,
Like the olden days, the public well here in Tuscan.
yes, there was.
Yep.
Should still be there as far as I'm concerned. But council voted trash it, fill it, so what you got is what you voted for. The way I feel anyhow.
Well, I'm not gonna argue with you, Dee, that maybe it shouldn't be in the middle of the road.
No, it wasn't the
Is there any,
location.
You could always run a pipe underneath the road and on the side.
Yeah, that's right.
You could have run that.
Anyhow, we'll move on
Is there any,
with-
just a note on that, is there any federal or provincial program to, to fight climate change and all this stuff that we can access to be prepared in the next 3 years?
Well, there's a variety of mitigation and adaptation funding models, both federally and provincially. First, you need a plan, right? And so depending on what the hazards might be, I mean, obviously, a drought is only one of the potential items that could happen. I know that the provincial, the answer to your question is yes, there are multiple funding options. How difficult it is to get funding from them depends on how much money you're looking for. And probably the more successful ones have a regional approach as opposed to just a one municipality approach. The EMO Nova Scotia, the minister responsible for EMO Nova Scotia is the Minister of Municipal Affairs. And in recent correspondence indicated that he felt that there ought to be a more proactive approach to this kind of event. And so I think that opens the door, excuse me, to provincial funding that could be unique to our circumstance this year. So that comment will not go unsolicited, I guess. So we'll be following up with the minister on that. There's a variety of things that we can do. We can do public wells, we can do laundry services in specific areas. There's 5 to 10 things you could do in different areas versus to do an assessment of where we need it the most and then to develop from there. Whether you can do it all in 1 year or not, it's hard to tell. It depends on what your plan is. So our first step is to have a plan, and I know that Janine, our EMO coordinator, is on this, and we'll be developing that plan. The first step of that plan was just response. right? And now it's, you know, it has to be proactive. This is the second time in 2 years, or 3. So I think it's,
I
your
think we had
concerns are.
originally said once in every 20 years, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But
Wasn't it?
twice in 3 years or whatever, it's
2 years.
2
2
years.
years
actually.
ago, wasn't it, the
Exactly.
driest in 136 years?
Kind
And
of,
I was talking to a guy today that digs wells, and he said it was just as bad this summer as it
Yeah.
was 2 summers ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go, so, anyway.
Mr.
Anyhow,
Chair,
we'll-
Mr. Chair, just maybe a point on the water. Did they do any testing on the wells in Camoes Hill? Alain, did you hear anything?
I was, the request was sent to the
Yeah.
Department of Natural Resources, or Lands and Forests now, and to the best of our knowledge, we haven't received a response
Oh.
to that request. I shouldn't say that. The immediate response said that they would,
Okay.
but we haven't received the results of that work.
Thank you.
So their response was swift, and they said that they would, but, you know, I'm not sure how long it'll take for that to happen.
Thank you.
I remember 2 years ago, Councillor Murphy
Yes.
mentioning it and
Yeah.
talking about it, but
Yep.
I guess nothing had happened then, and things aren't happening quick right now either, by the sounds of it, but anyway.
Yeah, and if you do testing, and 2 years later, you probably have to do testing again.
right.
You know, so it doesn't,
Yeah,
right? And, yeah, and then, of course, the moment you start getting rain, people get less interested in tests. You know, you don't only worry about the leak in your roof when it rains, right? So, so that's, I think there's a component there, but I think a more thorough approach, and I would say tri-county approach, would be
Yes.
an appropriate response.
That makes sense.
That's right.
Makes sense.
Okay, next item is, anything else to add? Next item is Warden's report. Let's see. September 12th, we had a meeting with the mayor, 2 wardens, deputies, and CAOs. Something I believe we're gonna do periodically to talk over major infrastructure that's with the county. The last meeting primarily was taken up mainly by the mayor and her center, just preliminary discussions. If the CEO has anything to add, he can add it in his report. Attended the meeting with the YMCA with Deputy Chris Frotton. And if you want to add something to that after, you can. And I attended I call it the grand opening of the SPCA. They've done a lot of work there. They had done a really nice job. So it's worthwhile going to see it. They've done a lot of work there. Had a lot of money, they had a large endowment, and, yeah, they put it to good use. And like Kathy, I went to the Armithero Industrial Commission meeting. Most of the land has been sold from the old cotton mill where it was torn down. So that's pretty well tied up. There's a few loose ends, but that land's pretty well been taken care of. We had a Pimlico Library meeting here, and we're still working on that. And Committee of the Whole, we were all here. That pretty well wraps up that report. And we're gonna move right on to, oh dear, the staff report.
Oh dear.
Oh dear, yeah.
Oh dear. Thank you, Mr. Warden. Just quickly, aquaculture, we'll be talking about that in camera. There's a section that has to, it's part of the negotiation, so it can't be released to the public just yet, but, you know, the public will see everything that we're doing on that eventually, once we get certain things established. We will be potentially applying for funds from ACOA to support the work that is required. Septic tank project, we have the possibility to construct 2 or 3 additional septic tanks with the permission from the province of Nova Scotia. We had a little bit of money left, and so that might add to our number of 39. We were at 39, want to do 44, so that would bring us to 42. So that would be great. Municipal admin building, the tenders for furniture items was released. That was like a really small tender. We felt it didn't have to be part of the main tender. And the main tender is due this week, this Friday. So we'll be joined by Wild Salt via video, and we will be opening the tenders. We won't go into any great detail. We'll be getting basic information because Wild Salt has to analyze the bids. Hopefully, we have multiple bids. It's been, I will say out loud that it's been a long process for the contractors, and making a change as drastic as we did, and it was, you know, a fairly significant change to council chambers, making it a lot less expensive, does require contractors to get prices twice. So it's, you know, this process is not exactly, you know, construction friendly. It's not necessarily friendly to the contractors, because it's a lot of work, right? But of course, we have to do it this way. So we've been, you know, receiving some comments about that, and you know, saying, you know, we understand, we understand, we have compassion for that, but this is the way we have to do it. We received confirmation that our FCM application was successful. We await final contract to confirm the funding and loan. I'm just gonna say that we have been successful, so that means we will be getting something. The official announcement has to come from FCM, which is why I'm not like
So you
jumping
can't
on
say a
the
number
table.
here.
Well, I think,
Don't get yourself in trouble.
yeah, I'd rather not get, I want to say it. I want to go on the
Yeah.
mountaintop and say it, but,
You can't say it.
oh, you will say it? I can't say it?
Nobody can say it.
Oh, okay, I can't say it, but he can say it.
Oh, I can't.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying nobody should say
No.
it.
We can,
just-
we can say we
not
got
yet.
it then, we can say we got something,
We receive confirmation, and once we get the funding, we actually get the contract signed off,
then,
we can then
okay.
disclose, but until then, we can't really disclose.
Is there gonna be some type of a public
Oh,
announcement?
yes, absolutely,
Good,
absolutely.
good enough.
But it's good news. It's, I mean, I obviously wouldn't say that I wanted to announce bad news. That's as far as I can go. So the, so there's Airport Corporation had a meeting, the board met, and they decided that a facilitated discussion in the future of the airport was necessary, so you will be asked to participate as council. And it'll be facilitated by a third party, we still don't know who that will be. And there'll be some work done internally by myself and others around the pros and cons of certain decisions. So you'll have, you know, information, internal information to help you understand what needs to happen and what work needs to happen to make it get to that place. The board received and accepted my resignation as interim manager effective November 30th. So the municipality will be paid their $4,000 a month until the end of November, and then that'll be that. Now, there might be some ongoing work that Hans might do, but I will no longer be interim manager. So whatever that is, we'll establish what that is, and if it has value, then the municipality will be compensated for that value. The Industrial Commission, I think, was addressed. East Pumlico water tank, this will be coming up very, very soon in discussions with consumers, the users, I'm sorry, of the big water tank. Currently, Pope's Road is being worked on, being assessed, and so Willett Road is where the big tank is. And so that is a project that could happen as early as next year. We're working with ACOA. ACOA is interested in the project, but we have no confirmation of funding. And we also need some understanding of what the users will be willing to pay. And there may be a portion that the municipality will have to consider on this project. So currently, we have about $260,000 put aside for the divestiture at the time. So that was provincial money that we have been holding on to since, probably 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, I imagine.
It's been about that
Yeah.
long. So, and it was specifically for renovation of the East Pubnico water utility, specifically the tank, because that's the biggest part. So that will be coming up, that will be hitting your radar fairly quickly. Dispatch, just a quick update on that. There have been 2 or 3 that officially left the town dispatch service. I'll be writing to the Mutual Aid Association in response to their request. They asked me to look at the value of mutual aid to the town of Yarmouth as a consideration, an offset, I guess. Not that the mutual aid should charge for their service, but there is a value there that ought to be offset against the dispatch. My work has uncovered approximately what that number might be, it's not as high as everybody was expecting. And so, it's probably not positive information that the mutual aid will be receiving. And then at that point, they can decide what's best for a mutual aid association at that time. And, I mean, it's not really the mutual aid association's decision, but all of our volunteer fire departments are there. They're all effectively represented by that group, and they have been leading in a lot of the meetings that we've had. So, and then just that there's an AMA fall conference next week. And I will be asking for a pilot project intended to aid Argyle to predict future operations. So about a year and a half ago, I would have done some work for council around predicting, doing sensitivity analysis around predicting the future. Never mind budgeting for 12 months, what will happen in 24, 48, 72, etc. So the province has been thinking about using their existing information to step it up to another level, and we were thinking the same thing. So I had indicated to the province, well, it might not be a bad idea for us to do it, and you pay us to do it, because then it goes at the speed of light as opposed to the speed of province. So, and not to, I mean, these things do take time. I'm not saying that. It's just the smaller the group, the more efficient we can be. I don't mean to offend too many people, but, and so they seem pretty keen on that, and so we'll see if they're interested once I write the letter. It will be great, because the worst case scenario is we'll get a software program that will be really, really great and easy to understand, and anybody can use it. Anybody can use it at any time. So you could play on your own, in theory, to understand how things might change in the future, as opposed to depending on a report that might come out once every year and a half or something like that. So that's really the intention. The rest of the staff reports are included. There's a lot of work going on. I'd like to highlight a couple things that are being planned. Obviously, Experience Argyle is coming up again. And Charlene, of course, is knee-deep in aquaculture water. And a lot of the financial deadlines have come and gone for the province of Nova Scotia and the information that we need to submit to them. And Hans has his hands full with a lot of different small projects. And I would like to also highlight that that Peter Kroll received a wonderful honor. It was presented with the Award for Excellence in Museum Practices, Individual Contribution by Associated Nova Scotia Museums. This happened at their AGM in Annapolis Royal on September 27th. It was, I'm sure, something that Peter was very pleased to have received. It is not necessarily something that's easy to get, so it's a great honor, and for somebody, I can't see anybody deserving more. So, you know, and Peter will be retiring this year, so we'll have one last kick at the can of Peter's years of experience, and Caitlin will be coming in on full time. So congratulations to Peter on that. We were all very, very pleased. Staff was very quick to respond and congratulate him for his lifetime work, really. That's my report.
Thank you. I'll talk to you further on that last subject sometime.
Okay.
Next item is strategic priority topics. There's nothing under that tonight. The next one is number 10 for decisions. And we got to amend the land use bylaw and municipal planning strategy. So again, it's all bylaws and policies tonight. I see there's a few things highlighted. Would you want to touch on that before we
Yes.
pass this?
Yes. So first, I want to make it clear that you are not passing the land use bylaw and municipal planning strategy today. You are passing a motion to bring it to the public, and then the results of that come to you, and then you can approve the MPS and LUB. So if I say LUB, I mean land use bylaw. If I say MPS, I mean municipal planning strategy. These two documents work hand in hand. The municipal planning strategy tells us what our intention, tells us and the world what our intentions are, what our focuses are, what our interests are, what we're interested in preserving, in protecting, in allowing in certain regions, and how. It defines our coastal regions, our wind farm zones, it describes these locations in a very specific way. And then, and so it sets out your intentions as council. That's what it does. The land use bylaw is the actual rule. So for instance, it might say, council has intentions of allowing cannabis in general use and rural industrial zones, which is on a map. You can clearly see where that is. And then the land use might say, we'll only allow those things by development agreement, and these are the only ways that you can actually do that. So one is like, this is what we'd like to do, and the other is, this is how we're gonna do it. So they work hand in hand. Oftentimes when we do amendments to MPS, we have to do them to LUB, because if you change your intentions, you also have to change the rules around your intentions. So there's been a long time that we've been working on these changes. And so the following information I would consider to be very useful to you as council. Look, you don't have to be experts at LUB and MPS. You don't have to be planning experts in order to govern your plan. So the first part that you would need to understand as governing body is what is it that has changed, the major changes from what we did before to what we're doing now. And one of the major changes is the use of development agreements. Now, we saw in public hearing how development agreements are used and how effective they can be in terms of engaging the public. There are 5, 6, 7 places where we would use development agreements that we never used before. So one is cannabis. Well, cannabis is new, so we didn't have anything in our land use bylaw because it was illegal before. New fur farms, motor vehicle racetracks, fish composting, fish reduction. That doesn't include sea cucumber, because believe it or not, sea cucumber is not a fish. It's an endocrine or something, I don't know. Anyway, it's not a fish. Let's not go there. And then large-scale wind turbine developments and wind farms. So those now require development agreements. And then automobile salvage yards and scrap yards also do require development agreements, but in many cases, these are not actually allowed. They're not actually allowed in some places. So just because I say cannabis is allowed as a development agreement, doesn't mean you can do it in Tuscan, because you can't. So places, so that certain areas that's considered densely populated, or for whatever reason, mostly around the density of population, many of these things are specifically excluded from those regions. Tuscan, West Pumlico, and Wedgeport are 3 mixed-use zones. They are considered our higher population areas, and therefore things like fur farms and cannabis and etc. they'll be denied if people try to do it in those locations. The intention is that you can't exclude it entirely from our region, but that it would be further away from the population, which makes perfect sense. So development agreements rules the day more so now than it did before. The other major addition is the addition of cannabis. So provisions are required to regulate development in this area. So we'll include provisions to minimize public exposure to alcohol and cannabis advertising. So you can't just be a billboard anywhere next to a school say, hey, cannabis, yay. There will be restrictions around that. Second, to allow it only by development agreement in rural development and general use zones. So what I mean by that is to allow the development of cannabis production and or processing facilities. Production, processing. Right now, there's no location in Argyle that could sell it as an outlet, like the NSLC in Yarmouth. So there's no reason to indicate any sort of provision on the sale of that product as a retail, okay? So it's also, and your bylaw also excludes it in the villages. So we have 2 villages. One is Quinnan Springhaven, and the other is East Kempt. So they are further off the beaten path. If that's something that you consider peculiar, you might, because I considered it fairly peculiar myself. So it's something that as we get through the public hearing, it might be something that you might reconsider, okay? But just so that you are aware, it is absolutely not allowed in the villages of East Kent and Quinn and Spring Haven, which I will give you the map, you'll see exactly where that is. I don't mean to suggest you don't know where East Kent is, but the village proper doesn't necessarily include everything that you are picturing, okay? So the actual mapping of that village will show you exactly what I mean. And then, of course, West Pimlico, Wedgeport, and Tuscan also have a mapped area where that's not allowed. The third area of concern would be the riparian buffer. This is a place that you might see controversy. Riparian buffer has been used a lot by our planner. It's actually a natural coastline protection. So basically what the rule is saying is if you construct close to a water course, you have to leave 25 meters between the water and your property alone. And that's to protect the water. So many people, when they develop camps or whatever, they bring the green right to the edge. And in many cases, that is exactly what has happened in the past. So that will no longer be allowable on our land use bylaw. So this is something to keep in mind, because this is an item that we will be advertising very openly so that people can comment yay or nay. You know, so those impacted by green algae would tell you that this is important, right? And those that like to go right to the edge for cosmetic or other purposes would tell you stop messing with my 25-meter border.
Did you say 75?
25.
25%.
25 feet
So
buffer.
what can they do as a buffer? Like what can they do on that 25?
Technically, they're supposed to keep some of the vegetation there. I think if you alter the vegetation, you can restore it with alternate vegetation. I believe that's the case. I'd have to get more information on that. And there's no, like, the alteration doesn't allow for you to dip the land. Like, it's basically not, it's basically to avoid having water runoff run directly into lakes and streams and rivers.
But this isn't the place for the argument for that tonight, but the Department of Environment already takes care of situations like that. This is to leave natural vegetation in that 25-meter buffer zone.
25 foot.
That's correct. Yeah.
If as it stands now, if you disturb that, the Department of Environment is more concerned about gravel runoff or loam runoff or whatever. This bylaw is to leave the vegetation in place.
That's correct.
So that can't happen. But if, under the situation we're under now, you can alter as long as you stay within the Department of Environment guidelines.
Right.
And I've been hearing a lot of flack about the 25 meters. That's quite a distance. If you buy a piece of lake frontage
It is.
and you've got to leave 25
Feet.
meters.
25 feet.
25 feet.
Well, first you said 75 meters, then it was 25 meters.
No,
No.
he didn't say 75.
25
25
feet. I apologize.
Well, go back to
Okay.
the
You said
tape.
25.
We'll go
That's
back to the
different.
tape later, but there
Yeah.
was 75 come out there somewhere.
All right, it's possible. I meant 25,
But
25 feet,
feet is the length of this room, right? Roughly.
a little less, but yes.
So that's a lot of trees in front of your cottage for somebody buying lake frontage
Yeah,
or ocean frontage.
yeah. And so,
And I've been hearing a lot,
yeah,
and I won't be able to support that part of this bylaw.
right. So, and that's part of the process, and you have every right to make that alteration at the end, or during, and I think that's why we have the public engagement, because I'm hoping that we'll hear from the public around that, which is why I've tried to pull
I
it
know
out
of
of the
one
change.
situation where a person has already gone and done what they want to do with their land long before they're gonna build on it, because they knew this might be coming.
Okay.
But what happens if the Department of Environment has a rule or a law, we can't go less, we can go more. So if environment, do we know if environment has that 25 meter?
No,
Or 25 feet,
no.
whatever the case may be?
No, if you're developing land, there's all kinds of regulations.
We can do our own with it.
You can- If you're doing quite a bit and there's a danger of runoff, you gotta put haystacks and all this stuff along the
So
border.
that's environment that says that.
Environment, right?
So it might not be our problem then, is what I'm trying to say. This might be an environment thing.
No, this is environmental, it's pushing to leave this buffer. So there's no
So we
risk.
can't go less.
So there's no risk of anything ever happening.
So we can't go less then. Am I right in saying that?
We can make the rules stronger than environment's rules, and I think what the warden is saying is that environment's rules are not as strict as what we are
That's what
saying.
we're saying here.
Sorry, I was just thinking of the opposite.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. That's obviously something that we're gonna
Yes.
be working through. So again, we're not approving this, we're approving the public hearing.
I think a lot of this is aimed at large forestry operations and mink farming and, but the small guy with the lake lot's gonna get wrapped up with it. That's what I'm saying.
You're 100%, 100%.
Anyhow, move on.
So there's, the other thing that this bylaw does is it combines recommendations that you've approved in previous public engagements, such as the Integrated Community Sustainability Plan, the ICSP, so some of you remember that.
Yep.
Also the MCAP, which is the Municipal Climate Change Adaptation Plan. So we had to submit what we're gonna do for mitigation and adaptation for climate change. So these two reports were basically blended into this land use, so that you just gotta go to that one place for all these regulations. There are some sections on partnership and collaboration, which indicate, that Argyle seeks to have regional partnerships. It lists the partnerships that they're in right now, and it also says under the conditions upon which you would you would continue to support those or enter into new partnerships. And it talks about that it has to be A, mutually beneficial, and then B, it has to be, sustainable regional development, improved or shared services. So there are some qualifiers that are right in your municipal planning strategy, which define how you would enter, or the potential of you entering into agreements regionally. So I would pay particular attention to that. The reference is on page 9 of the municipal planning strategy. If you have issues with that place is an area that we should, because this is an ever-changing thing. Some of these partnerships can be changing. When we wrote that was 1.5 years ago. If you have concerns about what's written there, please share them. Comprehensive review of our subdivision bylaw, including the standards for the construction of new private and public roads. So there's a recommendation saying, once we get this approved, the next step would be to determine what your standards would be, if any, for new private and public roads. So clearly the planner is recommending that you implement additional standards, because right now you have no significant standards on private roads.
Could that be used on some of these K roads possibly? We could get,
It includes public roads, it does indicate public roads as well. So K roads would be included in that definition, yes. So under what conditions would you, first of all, what is the standard that has to be followed on a municipal public road, and the standards that a K road would first have to meet the provincial subdivision, so anything that the province regulates, our regulations do not override, but it could define under what circumstances we could get into taking over a road.
Yeah.
So that's a comprehensive
Good.
piece of work.
because right now, they're not saying what their standards are. Like, they're saying, yeah, it's a K road, we're not gonna do anything with it, and nobody else gonna do anything with it either right now, so we
Yeah.
gotta work through that somehow, I think. It's,
So right now, the municipal planning strategy doesn't speak too heavily on that, and so we have to, this would address that specifically, to some extent. I'm not sure it would meet all of the expectations you might have, Councillor, around taking over K roads. But if that's something that council is interested in doing and interested in proceeding in, which we do have a motion right now has been in place, that we would take a look at that. I don't know that it would influence this work, but it could influence subsequent work of the municipal planning strategy. These things can be changed, right? So there's a lot of changes in this one, because it's basically modernizing it from, 8 or 9 years ago. So anytime, so it's not, if you see something here that you're not completely satisfied with, please let us know as staff, and we'll either address it now or in the future. The last piece I would say is that Argyle will now require a development permit regardless of the location of the development. So before, you did not require a development permit out in the rural development area. So you needed a building permit, but a development permit you did not require. So if you were, doing something that didn't require a building permit, then we would not know about it. So it's mostly for information. It's not like it's not a huge fee that would be charged for that. It's not a money grab thing that we're looking for. It's really information that we're looking for.
So by development permit, does that have to go to a public meeting?
No.
If somebody applies for a lobster tail shop amongst 5 houses?
Oh, okay, so, so there's the development permit, and then there's also, whether or not it fits in land use. So the development permit, what I'm referring to when I say a development permit is not whether that particular thing is allowed in the land use. It's essentially a permit that gets issued by the Public Works Department that says this contemplating a development in this particular area, and then the next step would be, okay, well, does this fall into the land use? So a permit would not be issued unless it fell through all of those things, but prior to now, there wouldn't have even been the requirement to do a development permit.
Okay.
Yeah, which is different than development agreement, and I'm trying not to
Yeah.
confuse too much.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because it can be fairly complex.
So what we need from this is just a motion to take this to public meetings.
Yes, and so the significance of the motion is that a development permit that is inconsistent with a proposed land use bylaw or amendment may not be issued for 150 days from the publication of the first notice advertising the intention to adopt or amend. So what will happen is you will pass a motion today, potentially. Let's assume that you pass a motion to proceed with the public participation program. Then we would advertise that. On the day of that first ad, we cannot accept any applications that would be inconsistent with the changes. Okay? So the only significance to that would be likely cannabis, but I'm not sure we could accept a cannabis application before it was law anyway. Because right now, we cannot, it's not legal until the 17th. So it's important for us to get some of these provisions in so that there is some land use control over that kind of development. So that is a lot of information.
It is, yes.
So I tried to highlight the higher level things and what things we will be advertising in a more public way. Those are the areas that we'll be focused on. It's not a full list, but this would be the main area that we would go out to public and explain, this is what it means, and then have them come back to us and give us input around it.
Do we have a suggested motion, so anybody would like to make it?
I'll move that we accept the land use bylaw and usual planning strategy as presented.
Is that clear enough, Chris?
Is that,
It's not what we need, is
or
it?
should I have it more specific?
Move to proceed.
To
with
proceed with public.
participation.
To public, thank
At
you.
this point, yeah, so we'll do that.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
I'll second that.
Here, no discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Against, motion carried. Quick question before we move off that subject. Any idea how long it'll be before we have a planner in place to help us do some of this? Seems like a lot of extra work for you.
I think we're in the conversation with the town of Yarmouth, preliminary conversations around using their resources. We may have to engage a third party to do some of these changes. Right now, the municipality of Yarmouth and Argyle are in the same boat, and so we're collectively looking at our options at this time. ideally, we would be able to join more than 2 municipalities.
Okay,
That would be the goal, but we'll see.
okay. Good update. Next item is the fee policy amendment, policies, bylaws, policy. The only major change I see is eliminating fees for criminal record check. And, for example, for $20 fee for job-related requirements, $5 for students returning to full-time studies the following school year. Is there anything else that's being changed in that?
That's it.
That's it? So we just need a motion to,
I'll make the motion.
Second that.
How many of these criminal record checks do we have in a year? Just,
It generates between $2,200 and $2,800, so divide that by 20.
Well, give or take.
Pardon me?
It's not all $20.
No, some of them are 5, so 20,
It's about
200.
Yeah, 150 to 175 per year.
just couldn't justify charging, having people come here and pay $20. There was a time where this was mandated by the RCMP. That's why we're charging, because it used to be that the RCMP detachment was going to deliver that service. So instead of them, it would be us, and that they had a fee associated with that. That no longer exists, and we had a question around the fee, and we could not justify it. We could not justify why we would charge that fee for that purpose when we do other things that are far more valuable and charge nothing.
so the people that come obviously have to be residents of our municipality?
So the process would be, so first of all, they would have to be residents of our municipality. So residents that are not of this municipality may actually still pay a fee, depending on where they live. How it worked before was they would come to this office. First of all, they'd say, I'd like to have a criminal record check, so they likely went to the RCMP. Then the RCMP sent them to us, and then, or they knew they come here already. They would come here, they would either pay a $5 amount, a $20 amount, or nothing, depending on whether it was volunteer or not. And then they would, on a Tuesday and Thursday, rush to the RCMP, show that they paid us or didn't, and they would get a criminal record check. So theoretically, we would make a resident go from RCMP to us, back to RCMP. So, and then charge them $20 to do it.
So now that somebody goes for a record check, they just go directly to the RCMP?
To the best of my knowledge, that is correct, effective after this is passed.
Okay.
So we will be making sure that gets advertised. People will still come here, but they'll be pleasantly surprised when we say it's free.
And
So we had a-
as a point of information, we do share the detachment with the municipality of Yarmouth, so we did advise them that we would be proposing to eliminate the fees, and they're intending to do the same, which would align both of us with most of the neighboring municipal units that don't charge.
very good. We had a motion, do we have a seconder on that,
Yeah,
Chris?
it was seconded, I think I heard. I'll second it in case.
It was,
I thought I heard someone
yeah. I
second it.
think
Chris, you got a seconder?
Sure.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Against, motion carried. Cell phone policy amendment. I will let you speak on that, because that pertains primarily to, or fully to staff, right?
And that does, I think the clerk will handle this one.
Sure, I can quickly go through the amendments to the cell phones and internet reimbursement policy, so we highlighted the title change. These amendments are simply things we do in practice, that's something that isn't written down, so we decided to write them down in the policy. The biggest change is we removed the detailed list of positions that are eligible for a cell phone allowance, and we simply, in 4.1.a, outlined the definition that would encompass what the CEO could accept as a position that would be eligible for an allowance, cell phone allowance. And we, on page 4, changed slightly the smartphone and cell phone replacement procedures, so the process of how an employee would go about getting their cell phone replaced. And finally, we added on page 5 of 6, a section on internet reimbursement, which again is something we do in practice. We already are doing, it just wasn't written down anywhere in policy. So me being a policy guru freak, I like to write down everything that we do rather than just have it floating in the air for people to sometimes get confused with. So those are the amendments that we're proposing. And as you did receive it 7 days before this meeting, it's eligible to be approved if you so wish.
I have a question. The employee eligible for an internet allowance, would that be a complete internet allowance? Does that mean it could be a partial?
CEO can respond to that.
Absolutely. The reimbursement is the lower of $80 or the actual cost.
Very good. Answers my question.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
mostly it's above that amount. So it restricts the amount to 80.
Yep.
And it's only for 3 positions,
Yep.
where it used to be for more. So we
Yep.
eliminated certain because it didn't make sense.
Doesn't apply.
And it didn't apply and
Yep.
things changed.
Good.
Of course, council has the full coverage because you require it as part of your business.
That's
And
right.
it's extremely low cost. It's not the same as,
It used to be.
this is 3G and it's based on use, whereas this internet is actually like hook up internet, you know, Eastlink, Bell, whatever. So it's a heck of a deal for council, actually.
Any more questions on that, Paul?
Just on the 4.1B, so I see you've got every position crossed off, which means that now you decide, or how does that work?
So that element was replaced with 4.1A above it.
Okay.
And so it
That's
says,
cute, yes.
employees eligible for cell phone allowance includes directors and full-time employees whose job duties regularly require them to either
Okay.
work out of the
With a-
office
Yeah.
on municipal business while required to communicate with the office. So it defines it not so much by position,
position,
it's a bit more,
Okay,
so every time, you know, like essentially any time that somebody's title changed, we'd have to change the policy. So the way that we do it here is a bit more effective.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great, yeah. So move that we approve the cell phone and internet reimbursement policy.
second.
Having a mover and a seconder, all in favor?
Aye.
Against, motion carried. Next item is relief of taxes and interest. And would you like to elaborate on the first one? It seems to be a large amount.
Yes, let me just pull it up here. Oh, yes, so this particular, property essentially is extremely problematic. It was surveyed and they couldn't find a proper assessment. And we were since advised that the owner's interest will be released and put under the municipality. It is an exempt property, and so there's no way that we can collect anything in the back. Most of that, again, would have been something that we had, excuse me, we had an issue with during tax sale, that we had problems to actually bring it to tax sale. So what happens is a piece of property that is problematic goes through a process, and there are fees that are attached to that land regardless of whether it's brought to tax sale or not. So we had some costs associated to that included tax sale and interest, and that's why the amount is $1,989.92. So insofar as the future of that property is still unknown, but we'll no longer be collecting any taxes on it until we can figure it out.
And the other one was just a $5 housekeeping. Motion not up to
How
date.
many of these problematic parcels of land do we have?
That's an interesting question.
They crop up.
Yeah.
And, yeah, we deal with them one at a time.
That'll be there.
So sometimes it's errors that crop up through a system.
Through the system, sometimes the properties have been assessed where they shouldn't have been.
Yeah. You know, brand new assessment account numbers that come out of the woodwork. There's a variety of reasons why. Sometimes it's like somebody passes away and there's no good description of that particular property, and then over time, you know, people pay the bill, and then they stop paying the bill. And then you try to figure out what happened, and it turns out that piece of property had some issues. But if people pay the bill, you don't know that there's an issue. Because the assumption is when somebody pays a bill, everything's fine.
Yes.
Right? So that happens, and of course, when people pass away, you have situations where that can cause issues. We have quite a few on the list at all times. You know, we always seem to be dealing with half a dozen to a dozen. And we try to identify, some of them get identified properly, some of them don't end up like this, some of them end up with a proper deed and description.
I guess in 2018, I guess I figured that we probably would have that, right, but obviously not.
No.
In fairness, it's come up more so since the advent of property online and mapping, and then all of a sudden you notice you can't map it, it's not mapped, nobody can find where it's supposed to be.
No.
So that's when these things come up. I'm not saying this one is like that, I'm not intimately familiar with this one, but those are the things that do crop up.
Is it fair to say that surveying years and years ago was nowhere near as accurate as it is now? Because I've heard.
No, it wasn't anywhere near as common.
Okay, because I've heard, I
Yeah.
won't quote a name, but they said if you started at the baseline and went all the way down and done all the properties, you'd end up losing 3 or 4 properties if it was done accurately.
Where I heard about that, we found an 1845 map that, when overlaid on the current satellite imagery, was 3 feet off.
Wow.
Oh my God.
So
That's pretty-
accuracy, I don't think was much of an issue. It's commonality.
Yeah.
It's not so
Yeah.
common. It's more and more common. And now surveys, when they are prepared and signed by the surveyor, are automatically filed with the Registry of Deeds.
Right.
Whereas before they weren't. They were only filed at the person's, the client's request or consent. But now they are the surveyors are obligated to file them automatically. So we're getting more and more surveys, and as that goes on, and it's consumer pay, therefore it's nothing governmental whereby there's a system and everything is getting surveyed or mapped properly by virtue of a survey. That unfortunately doesn't happen. And anybody who takes a look at property online has to read the disclaimer that's immediately on the bottom, that this is a graphic representation used with the best information available, but cannot be used for legal descriptions. So, plain and plumb. If you find a survey attached to that, okay, use a survey, but don't use the property online.
So anyhow, can we have a motion to relieve these 2 taxes?
So
The
moved.
second one was $5.91.
Yes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Okay, other business, development agreement. Here we go again. Ellen, over to you.
I'm not gonna spend as much time on this one as the others. First of all, I'm having issues opening it.
Oh, then why would this one been at the same time as we did the other one?
Because the last one was you had seen before, and so the first, so this is the next, so
First step is
first
this.
time you saw the one that we did on public hearing, you had passed a motion to bring it to public hearing.
Oh, okay. That's
This
how it works.
requires that motion. That's why
Mercy.
it's, yep, no problem. I'm just having some technical difficulties here. So this is another development agreement in the Tuscan Business Park with a company named Metatron.
Classy name.
Solutions and consultant.
Thank you. I'm just got my website frozen here. Maybe I can follow on yours. Oh, thank you. So this essentially is, so the description on this, again, a lot of the similar concerns around a type of business that is considered heavy industry, odor and noise mitigation. Again, you'll see the wording very similar to the wording that was in the previous one. So this is an item that may actually generate the same type of interest with the same type of people, because it is not far away as the crow flies from the initial location.
Maybe the noise might be a little more of an issue.
It's possible that, so from my understanding of the process, and I'm just going down so Schedule B on the agreement is the land that is being, the development that's being proposed. The land is the first portion or piece of land on in the Tuscan Business Park after the Slocum, after the residential zone, which is Ruel Gardner Lane. So Ruel Gardner Lane would be on the west side, and it would be the next property after that on the left-hand side. It would be to the south of Gary and Construction's warehouse in that location. So just to give people an understanding where that is. And so you hit the brewery and you turn left. It's on that side, as opposed to turning right, which was the other one. So Metatron facilities proposed to consist of storing parts and steel, welding, machining, shearing and bending, sandblasting, thermal spraying, powder, coating, painting, and research and development work. All of these operations are intended to be undertaken inside the building. All exhaust systems from the industrial processes will include inline filters. The exhaust stacks will be located on the north side of the building. The thermal spraying processes will be contained within acoustical rooms within the enclosed building. The business activities will also include demonstrations of developed processes to customers and training of customers and students on equipment and processes designed by Metatron. So an acoustical room is what it sounds like. It is a sound reduced environment. Dust collecting, and it is a robotic process. So it requires engineers, it requires people to be involved, but it's also a robotic process. It's proposed to be a steel frame and metal siding building measuring 50 wide, 50 long, and 20-foot high ceilings. Is intended to increase the building size to 50 wide and 150 long feet. The lot is intended to be cleared of trees and excavated to 8 feet. 20-foot wide grassed area is intended to be installed. Generally, all manufacturing activities and shipping and receiving will take place during normal daytime hours, depending on workload. They may take place in the evening hours, however, overnight or 24-hour activities not intended to be included in the business activities on the property. So this location is quite a bit closer to the residential zone as the previous one. So I would suggest that you have the following options. You can begin the process of public engagement, which will inform you around what the public is requesting or needing of this particular development. If you require more information before you go to public, you can absolutely do that. You can absolutely choose to defer a decision on this until you get additional information if you are missing information. We can certainly, most of the conversations and discussions have been had between our development officer, John Sullivan, and our senior planner, who's retired. And so most of the information was shared with them, and they would be, I'm sure, happy to present any additional information you may need if you're not prepared to go to public consultation at this time. So keeping in mind, public consultation does not force you to make a decision, but it informs you in some of the areas that people may be concerned. My recommendation is based on what we saw today, the sooner you can get to the public, the better. And, you know, it doesn't mean that you're, I think if you have concerns now, then you can raise them, absolutely. But I think, you know, even without the public input is, you know, that public input was really, really good today. And so we want to get that out as quickly as we can, particularly because we're going to be working hard to get that information to them on the other property, which is not that far away.
That's right.
So that would be the presentation on that, and if you had any questions or concerns.
So what's the feeling of council? Like, just a comment, like we went years and years and years with no activity, then we opened it up for residential down below. And now we're getting all kinds of people interested in developing the park, and you gotta cater to the residential part of it that we created ourselves, so we're in a catch-22 here, I feel. So, yeah.
This is great, this is great.
We gotta find another place for a business park is what I'm thinking.
So,
I'm thinking that this is great. I just see that the park be filled up. Hey, let's work for it.
So you're making a motion that we go
Yes,
to
I
the
am.
public?
Yeah.
And we-
Second.
Okay, to move this to the public forum, we have a motion on the floor, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Back to substance abuse policy. We've touched on that quite a bit, so we'll let you brief us again.
did you want to go?
Sure.
Chris, you can handle this
I
one?
can give you a quick explanation of, or overview of the policy that we're proposing. Obviously, in light of the legalization of cannabis next week, we felt it was a good opportunity to implement the substance abuse policy to staff, council, and volunteers of the municipality of Argyle. This policy is to communicate the expectations of the municipality of Argyle surrounding substance use, misuse, and abuse. So this policy is not being brought up for any specific reason. It's simply to outline our expectations clearly in writing. And obviously, with the legalization of cannabis, a lot of unknowns come out. So we just felt like getting ahead of the game was important. I won't go line by line of this policy. We have presented it to staff. We're starting to receive comments. We wanted to bring it to you just for your general knowledge. This would serve as your official notice if no substantial changes were made. It will be brought at the next council meeting, which is October 30th, so you have up until that time to read it, to give us your comments, your feedback. Very quickly, it provides clear definitions of the topics that are outlined in the policy. It outlines the expectations of the municipality in general, of the managers, and of each council member, employee, and volunteer, the roles and responsibilities of each of those parties, and also how to deal with suspicion of impairment, either at work or if whether or not someone is fit for duty, and how we assess that, and how we deal with the person that would not be fit for duty. We decided to include members of council, employees, and volunteers in this policy, which we don't typically do. Typically, it's geared only towards staff, but just with the possibility of all of those people being involved in municipal events or at work or at a council meeting, we felt it was important to include everyone. That is where I will stop for tonight. I can answer any questions or pass them on to Alain if they're more HR related. But like I said, this will be brought to your attention again with possible changes based on your comments and staff's comments.
Councillor Surratt.
I've got a couple of questions, and one will be to the solicitor. Do you think this would pass a court test?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at it in detail, and I have to take a look at the case law. When is it going to be brought back to council?
October 30th is when we were intending to do it, but it's not.
I could give a better answer with a little bit more time here. It is a loaded question.
I would like to,
Yeah.
if it was possible for.
We can share where we got this from with it.
Sure. This is from our Human Resources Service, HR Downloads, which is a service that provides us with model policies. They have an entire section on the legalization of cannabis including a policy on substance abuse, and those policies are reviewed by
Probably
municipal
staff-
experts.
Staff solicitors and DOJ.
It's staff solicitor.
Correct.
However,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that it's not.
You still want,
A good
you still
idea
want a
to-
point of view. I'm not sure I'll give you a full-fledged opinion.
No,
I'll
but
give you my point of
I
view.
think it would be all right to get
Yeah.
our solicitor too, my opinion anyhow. So in question 2 is, this would be to Chris. Oktoberfest, I'm just gonna use one example. So this is a municipal held
Function.
event, thank you guys, lost that train of thought. What happens there?
Sure. This policy wouldn't address any municipal event that would include the use of substance. That would be in our hospitality policy, which we are, by provincial law, we have to approve as well. So that would regulate the use, either alcohol or cannabis during a municipal event, the purchase of it, the use of it, the sale of it, or anything to do with that, through either municipal staff or through third-party organizations. So this is more specifically the use, misuse, and abuse of substances at the workplace.
Very good. I was thinking if they went to Oktoberfest and they were working
Yep.
there at the same time, it puts them in a position I wouldn't wanna see that, you know.
If you were, so what this policy's under section 4,
Yeah.
I guess B, C, and D. Members of council, employees and volunteers must remain fit for duty for the duration of their shift. Now, if they were in fact at an Oktoberfest and they were volunteering as a municipal volunteer for Oktoberfest, the use, 4C says use, possession, distribution, or sale, use, possession, distribution, or sale of drugs or alcohol during work hours, including paid and unpaid breaks, is prohibited. So if somebody is enjoying the Oktoberfest and is not part of the organizational committee, that they're not there for working purposes. But if you are a volunteer at that activity for the purpose of organizing it for municipal purpose, this policy could state that you cannot drink.
So the volunteer banquet, let's say, and forbid me, the manager there,
Yeah, I mean, this.
you know what happens there if they're doing the
Yeah.
banquet? I
I-
just wanna be careful.
No, and I understand
I'm
exactly
not
what
saying
you're
they're
saying.
not doing anything wrong.
No, I understand exactly what you're saying, and to the clerk's point, some of that falls under hospitality, and some of it falls
two
under
different-
work. So this is, the primary purpose of this would be for work hours at work. So somebody operating a backhoe, somebody, behind a computer, regardless of what they're doing.
Yes.
If you're not fit for duty, then there are provisions in here that say this is what you got to do, right? And we also have to recognize that as an employees, you have a duty to accommodate. So if people have if they have issues of addiction, we have a duty to accommodate. So it's not about shaming, it's not about that.
It's well
about-
written in there, I
it's
read
about-
it all.
There's a balance there, and so we
Yes,
have
there
that
is.
duty as well. And so in the policy is very good at addressing that as well.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Thank you. That answers. Yeah.
So, do you want any changes made, or do we want to accept this policy as it is, or you want to hear back from the solicitor?
This is my preference if we had our solicitor look at it. It would be, but I mean, I'm just one. If they don't want it, that's fine.
You have to wait for 7 days, so we haven't given the official notice, so.
This is
we'll
your
only
first
be-
notice? Yeah, so you don't have any choice.
This is first read.
You don't have any choice.
That's
Sort of.
So first notice, it's not first
Very
reading,
good.
it's a first notice. You don't have any choice.
Yeah,
That's all.
okay,
I should have something on your desk by the 29th. Sure.
okay.
And I'm not perfectly clear on, when
Go ahead.
our roles and responsibility, like the volunteer banquet, we are presenting to volunteers. That's part of our
Great point.
duty, right? Are we allowed to have a drink? Is it the bar, right? So it just,
We'll seek to clarify all
Yeah.
of that in our
If you
policy.
could, yeah.
yeah.
That would be good.
Well, under this policy, you would not be allowed to, because it specifically states members of council's employees and volunteers.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
And-
the only,
and
Question is whether that would be work-related function, and
That's correct.
clearly.
Or whether or
It
not,
is work-related.
or whether or not you want that to be in the policy, that's the
Yeah.
reason why we bring drafts up for
Yeah.
debate.
Yes.
Yeah, anyway.
You know, things like those types of events, you can specifically address in
Mhm.
policy.
Yeah.
You can do that.
I've been going to volunteer banquets for 20-something years, and I've never seen a situation where a counselor or an employee done anything wrong when it comes to the use of alcohol, and I've seen them have a drink or whatever, but I've never seen it an issue. So sometimes you can over-govern what you're trying to govern, so we don't want to be really, really restrictive, and that's an opinion, that's not council's stand, that's my opinion.
Generally speaking, it's proper for you to have a policy, because if there is an abuse, then what will you rely on in order to deal with it?
Right.
And that's something you need to
Yeah.
have, so that, as I believe, the CAO mentioned, there's a balance to.
But you don't need to be black and white.
I don't disagree with that. You have to go into the nebulous gray zone. So, anyway, that was a term we used in law school.
Like you say, you don't get insurance for your house to burn down. I guess coming to the point then, what I'm saying is although in 28 or 27 years you've never seen it, it could happen that we have a policy.
And then it's covered.
And it's covered, I guess, at the end of the day. Yes.
Again, as I mentioned earlier during the public hearing, it's a reasonableness
Yes.
issue. It's what's reasonable in circumstances.
Absolutely.
And the other thing that you should be considering is that in this policy, there are 3 groups that are included: volunteers, staff, and council. That's your choice as to who it, I mean, I would absolutely, we need something for staff. There's like, I would not exclude, I mean, the whole point of it is primarily
Yes.
for staff. But, you know, volunteer might be a bridge too far, it may be.
Yeah.
And so that's something for you to consider. These things are not necessarily bang, bang. And, you know, some of those events that you have questions about, you should think about what you would like to see happen there in those circumstances, and give us that information, and we will build it into the policy.
And on one side, I guess if they're representing municipality of Argyle, if they're a volunteer, you want them to be kind of decent and, you know, nothing goes wrong.
Yeah.
So if you exclude them, it's kind of a, yeah, it don't work.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of talk about substance abuse policy because of
Yes.
the legalization of cannabis.
Well, this is a great thing, what you're doing here.
But the substance abuse policy is not a new issue, right? We're just adding another layer with cannabis. So it's just, we never really had one before, and a lot of organizations, a lot of smaller organizations don't have that, and so cannabis just raised the point.
It has.
And raised the issue again, so that's why it's being done now.
It's good to look at it.
Okay, so we'll be looking at this again at the end of the month.
And any feedback from any counselor between then and now would be absolutely appreciated, so that we can represent as best we can.
Okay, move on to correspondence and information. We only have the waste check, August financials for everybody to view. Moving on to financial requests for community grants. We have one from Drumlin Heights Senior Girls Volleyball Team for $500.
So move.
Second.
All in
And
favor?
is that from mine?
No, it's
Yeah.
from Richard.
No, it's
No.
gonna come out from mine,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
It didn't think it really mattered what district, anyhow.
Well, the recorder has to know,
It's just important to know whose
Okay.
budget
Yes.
it comes from.
gotta keep track of who's giving what.
Does he have no money left?
All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. And we have another one
Okay,
for
yes, I'd like to move.
Deputy Warden.
I'd like to move that we give $500 to the Abrams River Hall Society. They're trying to put it back together so that it doesn't fall apart. And there's a group that got together and they've reformed the committee, like with new members, younger members in the community that decided that they didn't want to see the school. Yeah, so I'll
I'll
move
second
that we
that
give
motion.
$500
Second.
and that it comes out of Kathy's.
Never mind.
Oh, yeah, what the heck? You got plenty of money.
All in favor?
Yeah,
Aye.
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 Against? Motion carried. Any topics for the next meeting or notice of motions? Kathy's got her hands waving.
Well, I'm back at the garbage situation again. I've had complaints about garbage again. It seems that there's always garbage. It's always blowing or raining. It's nobody's fault. That's nothing we can control. But people are complaining that they put out their garbage and they usually put it like in the green bin so the garbage bag doesn't fly everywhere. And it's true. I pick up garbage all the time and there's always big garbage bags in the ditches, and we have big ditches in East Pamlico. And so they're complaining that what happened today, I'll start over again. Today, what happened, the garbage went out and it was late. And some people put their garbage bin out and they put the blue bag in the bin. And the guy just opens the bin, takes the garbage out and throws it at the right spot, the blue bag, the white bag, and then they take the cart and they load it into the compost. So today, what happened was those bins stayed there with everything. So one person called and complained, and he said what happens, what they're doing is the cart, they take that cart and it goes right into the compost, so those bags go into the compost where they're not supposed to go. That's the problem there. So I don't know. We've had a lot of complaints about garbage. It's not the pickup that's the bad, it's just that the garbage is being blown everywhere, and I don't know, I'm still going on back my theory that we should have 3 bins instead of just one for compost, one for recyclables, and one for garbage. So that's my thought, and it's something, again, I'm bringing this back up again.
Do you want that on the next October meeting?
Yeah, sure.
You have that, Chris? Discussion on garbage and number of bins. Okay, very good, Kathy. And any notice of motions? Seeing none, question period, anything? On Facebook, nothing? Okay, we're going to go in camera. Can we have
Slow mo.
motion to go in camera?